Still worse, like puppeteers, they control the question of reparations in their blood-stained hands by advancing their ambitious puppets. It is an insult to our intelligence and the dignity of our people.
Launch, and what I'm excited about is to see how the space has evolved and how it's grown, and that's largely, I think, because of the organizing and the advocacy work of civil society. So as chair of the Civil Society Working Group, I've seen from the very beginning, both in the establishment of the forum itself and the advocacy that it took to get the resolution passed, and to make sure that it actually reflects what people envisioned when they were calling for the establishment of a permanent forum. And that's going back to the Durban Declaration of Program of Action. It's going back to the International Decade for People of African Descent. And so what we've seen is each forum subsequently comes closer and closer to the vision that we had. And so that's been encouraging to see.
While I am pleased to hear the repeated references to the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, the DDPA, I am more concerned that the DDPA is fully and completely preserved, promoted, and implemented, particularly that its working group is fully funded and functioning. The Durban Declaration and Program of Action is our freedom charter, written by us with others for us. It is the most recent expression of self-determination of African and other formerly colonized and enslaved peoples. We must not allow the colonizers to seduce us or to confuse our most uninformed and vulnerable into servitude with fancy talk of Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and others. It is offensive and a major contradiction that this body puts on the podium an honored position two of the DDPA's greatest opponents, both colonizers and genocidal arms dealers, the United States and Canada, neither of which meaningfully commemorated the decade of people of African descent. Still worse, like puppeteers, they control the question of reparations in their blood-stained hands by advancing their ambitious puppets. It is an insult to our intelligence and the dignity of our people, African descent worldwide, but more, it guarantees us less than the full and complete reparations to which we are entitled.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, the third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent brings together the United Nations, government, civil society, human rights defenders and more at a critical moment for equality and racial justice. We celebrate the invaluable achievements and contributions of people of African descent across the range of human endeavor, from political and civil rights struggles around the world to science, technology, industry, literature, music, and all the arts and more. At the same time, racial discrimination and inequality continue based on centuries of enslavement and colonialism. By establishing this permanent forum, the international community demonstrated its commitment to addressing these injustices. Now we must build on that momentum to drive meaningful change by ensuring that people of African descent enjoy the full and equal realization of their human rights, by stepping up efforts to eliminate racism and discrimination, including through reparations, and by taking steps towards the full inclusion of people of African descent in society as equal citizens.
In support of the petition seeking the adoption of the reparations presentment as an international instrument in furtherance of reparatory justice, offer these comments. In our quest for repair, primary attention is given to state actors who were directly involved in the transatlantic chattelization wars on Africa. However, nation-states were not the only actors in these wars, trade, and chattelization of African bodies. Charters, legal instruments that establish the formation, life, rights, duties, liberties, and powers of public and private bodies, gave license to non-governmental actors to engage in the chattelization crimes. We must also target these non-governmental complicit actors in our reparatory justice claims. The reparations presentment is one method and tool of addressing these criminals. The reparations presentment is a formal statement of crimes and offenses committed by a non-governmental party or its predecessor entity in the war, trade, and/or chattelization of Africa. Africans. It lays out the debt owed to the heirs and descendant victims of those crimes and offenses. It gives the right to the heirs and descendants to bring forth claims and receive payment on behalf of their ancestors from whom they have inherited the continued impact of those crimes and offenses. Currently, no global claim instrument exists that can initiate an internationally recognized process for which crimes and debt determination can be assessed and redress negotiation for centuries of crimes can rest. With the recognition, endorsement, adoption, and certification of the reparations presentment by the Permanent Forum, we will have such an instrument that all Africans can use globally. As such, I urge the Permanent Forum to give full and immediate attention to our petition. Thank you.
I'm gonna pray till I die.
Men, women, and children were brought here from Africa to work on plantations, growing indigo, rice, and cotton, turning a profit for their masters. But all that changed in 1861, when the Civil War broke out, largely over slavery, pitting states in the South against those in the North. More than 1,000 freed slaves settled here on Dafusky Island, but only 13 descendants of slaves occupy the island today. They're struggling to uphold their rights to inherited land that is now prime real estate.
There must be a way that they could address people who have always had their land, no fault of their own, been impacted by development.
I give the floor to Sifiwe Baleka, Balanta Burasa History and Genealogy Society in America.
Members of the Forum, great delegates. My name is Sifiwe Baleka, and I'm speaking in my capacity as the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. Malcolm X tried to bring the Afro-descendant and New African self-determination and reparations claims before the World Court, and he was assassinated. Before him, Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois tried to bring our claims to the League of Nations and were denied. Since then, Afro-descendant people still living under alien domination have been blocked from bringing our claims before the International Court of Justice. We were thus encouraged when UN Resolution 75-314 establishing this forum emphasized the opportunity for the implementation of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. The DDPA Section 104 calls for providing access to justice and legal assistance, and the forum's mandate explicitly authorizes the forum to, quote, request the preparation and dissemination of information by the United Nations system on issues relating to people of African descent. Isn't the ICJ part of the UN system? But the forum has not used its mandate to take the bold and courageous step of requesting an advisory opinion from the ICJ, even though such a request was drafted and submitted with the exact legal questions to be answered at the second session of the forum, and the forum president stated she would sign it. The essential issue is this. Millions of Afro-descendant people are still living under alien domination. Yet until now, we have not had access to the highest court on planet Earth. If the ICJ can hear the case of genocide committed against the people living in Gaza, why can't the ICJ issue an advisory opinion on behalf of the victims of the Maangamizi, chattel enslavement, ethnocide, colonialism, and its continuing harms? Are we still considered less than other people? Is it the case that only some people have access to the World Court while others don't? We need the forum to have courage and take bold action now. The forum must assert the people's understanding of its mandate and become activists, not just a reporting mechanism to the UN Human Rights Commission. In conclusion, let's end the first decade of people of African descent with a real accomplishment, initiating the case for reparations. It only takes the new forum chair, June Sumer, to sign the request, supported by 300 representatives of civil society, and send it to the registrar of the ICJ. That can be done by the concluding session of this forum if we, the delegates, demand it. We must force the UN system to take a position, and the forum is the mechanism to do that. Thank you.
In Brazil, during the transatlantic slave trade, some 4 million slaves were brought from Africa to Salvador de Bahia. They worked under extreme conditions on sugar plantations, a commodity that changed international trade during colonialism, boosting Brazil's economy. Sandra dos Santos' ancestors fled oppression and violence and formed the Quilombo of Danda. They called themselves Quilomboles, a Brazilian term for people of African origin. For Sandra, conflict never ceased.
Vinha trator para derrubar, né? Aqui veio muita questão de conflito. Quando a gente plantava, chegava lá no outro dia, havia tudo destruído.
Sandra fought to keep the land her ancestors worked for centuries.
E aí foi no momento que eu parti, né? Me se tornei uma líder. Chega em sofrimento, abaixa meus bisavôs, meus avós, agora meus pais. Eu não vou querer isso, né? Futuramente.
After months of legal battles, a new law allowed her to remain here.
After a decade, our persistent calls for reparations continue to be overlooked. The old ways of requesting reparations have not worked. The systems and structures that have oppressed us for so long will not correct themselves. It is not enough to ask those who have oppressed us to do what is right and just. We must demand it, enforce it through the power of strategic litigation paired with relentless advocacy. Today, I am proud to announce that civil society has come together to establish the Global Litigation and Advocacy Network. This initiative will harness the collective expertise of legal professionals, activists, community leaders worldwide. Together, we will employ strategic litigation alongside advocacy to tackle systemic discrimination against people of African descent, to secure reparations and drive profound systemic changes.
I'm here with the chairwoman of the Federation of People of African Descent, Madam MC Campbell Barr. Thank you for your time and all that you do. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this third session. What are your impressions on the attendees and the intervention thus far?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm so happy with the third session. As you know, I've been vice president of my country, Costa Rica. When I was vice president, my government worked a lot to achieve the resolution to have the permanent forum. And I have the privilege to be the first chair of the permanent forum. And now, in this third session, we have first a lot of participation of civil society. We have a strong discussion about the issues that is important to us. We have support from different governments, but more than that, we acknowledge that we have more and more young people participate in this discussion. We understand that we need to work together, intergenerationally, because we understand that the youth will be those who open the doors for the next generation of the humanity.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Dr. Glennie King, also known as Dr. Akila Mukaram, President of the Afro-Descendant Nation. Over the past 469 years, Afro-descendants' identity in the United States has changed from nigger, Negro, colored, Afro-American, Black, and African-American. We, the Afro-Descendant Nation, urge the distinguished officers of the PFPAD to accept and recommend to the United Nations that they accept and mandate that the member states notify every citizen in their countries that we are Afro-descendants with the following specific definition. The term Afro-descendants refers to descendants of peoples who were forcibly dispossessed of their homeland, Africa, were transported to the Americas and slavery diaspora for the purpose of enslavement, were subjected to slavery, were subjected to forced mixed breeding and rape, have experienced through force the loss of mother tongue, culture, and religion, and or have experienced racial discrimination due to lost ties or partially lost ties from their original identity. Afro-descendant with this specific definition is our great unifier. It transcends race and provides an elevation to lineage and heritage. We are a diverse people with different ideologies, religions, and beliefs. We have become a new people from our experiences that lingered from our foreparents suffering through slavery. We also urge this forum to recommend to the United Nations that the Afro-descendant nation receive the 194th seat in the United Nations as part of their equity initiative so that our voices can be heard and we will not be overlooked. No one else is speaking on Afro-descendants' behalf. Consider taking a look at the Jewish materials claims against Germany as a framework or guide that we can use and modify as Afro-descendants to secure reparations and reparatory justice from our oppressors, and dedicate a specific forum or bold agenda item for Afro-descendants at the second International Decade of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Thank you very much.